Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for joining us here on the program. We come your way on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Mondays at 1 a.m., and also Wednesdays at 9 a.m. for a special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We're podcasting, we're video casting. We are also looking for support, and we're also encouraging you to participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, and I will tell you more about that later on in the program. We have a returning guest with us today, and I'm very excited to have him come back to our microphones, our cameras, whatever, our program, if you will, and talk more about what we started with. And it is the Aetherius Society, coordinating with the gods from space. Reverend Paul Nugent is our guest today, and thanks for coming back. It's always a pleasure to have the kinds of conversations that we do that you and I shared the first time around. Thanks for being with us.
Well, it's my pleasure, Richard, and it's very kind and almost flattering of you to invite me back, but I'm very happy to be here with you again.
And the subject matter, of course, is something that I have, part of the subject matter, I should say, is something that for the first 10 or 12 years, I did not want to go into, only because of you might say, the level of controversy. I start going into this particular area, and now I've got people, oh, here he goes. He's off. He's lost his mind, because there are people who still believe the earth is flat and that we are at the center of the universe. Well, if you want to go that far, I personally am the center of the universe. However, that's for my universe, okay? Whereas Reverend Paul Nugent is the center of the universe for his universe. So it's all a matter of perspective, right? But when we start talking, as I read there, cooperating with the gods, plural, from space, we are talking about life out there, are we not?
Well, if you're asking me that question, Richard,
I am.
Yeah, and we certainly are, and I think that we're literally on the cusp of what I would have to argue is the biggest change in the whole history of the human race, when we are coming into this far greater realization of the reality within which we don't just exist now, but have always existed. And it is literally cosmic, and it is teeming with life, and that includes, in fact, intelligent life, and an intelligent life within our very own solar system, albeit on a different dimension. It's a multi-dimensional universe.
There is something that is rather interesting about about this aspect of the Aetherius Society. And that is, of course, that in our modern day, the demarcation point or the milestone was, I believe was it 47 or 51? No, it was 47, because I'm thinking of Area 51. It was 1947 when this whole subject matter really, really took off with the craft that crashed in what is now Area 51, and all of the questions, and oh no, it was a weather balloon, and on and on. And the question that I ask of people, even such as yourself, and maybe I'll put this question to you, the government is now sort of, kind of, in a way, they're acknowledging the existence of life out there. However, what they're trying to do is, and I don't know if it's America or if it's just human nature in general, maybe from the reptilian brain, they're making life out there to be some kind of enemy. And I keep uttering the phrase, if they can travel intergalactically, we wouldn't be having this conversation, Paul. We wouldn't. They would have already taken over. We'd either be enslaved or dead. So let's talk a little bit about UFOs that are real. They are friendly. They are certainly alien, if you will, a real, friendly, and alien. And the government knows it, but the government somehow always has to stick its nose in in this process of discovery of as the phrase goes, of contact. Can you sort of share your perspectives on that?
Yeah, I can. Well, first of all, I would say that politicians, on the whole, by definition, are not into spirituality. It's not their normal world. They live in a different world, and yet all this information about UFOs gets directed towards governmental agencies, and I think that they don't really understand it, and they are stonewalled by it. But there was a very telling statement supposedly made by Winston Churchill during the Second World War, which he actually made to Dwight Eisenhower after an outstanding sighting by a Royal Air Force crew. And by all accounts, what Winston Churchill said to Eisenhower is this must immediately be classified, because it would cause mass panic amongst the people and a disbelief in the church. And he might have been somewhat right in that. And I think that has probably been the sort of prevailing, with a very small w, wisdom of politicians, is to just sort of wrap this up because we don't understand it. And we certainly don't want it getting out to the people, because we will have some kind of chaotic disorder, which is quite possible. And I think in that regard, the UFOs are playing a very clever game. Game probably isn't quite the right word, but I think that what is happening is that they're not coming overtly, because I think if they did come overtly, it would cause lawlessness, possibly anarchy, just the way the world is a powder keg as it is. And I think that anything like that would just sort of really has the potential certainly to set it off. And they don't want that. But I think this very sort of subtle, my goodness, what is that people are having, that experience, that's inexplicable. Did you see that? This sort of very slow, gradual appearance that people experience, that people are having, allowing it to sort of sink in, raise questions, I think is, if this is the case, is a very clever and subtle way of preparing us for this greater reality. And I think that I would certainly throw crop circles into that same mix. I think that, the first thing is we're mystified, and then we try and sort of say, well, it's men with planks of wood, and we can't wrap our heads around it. But they don't go away. I mean, if anything, they just get more complex and more incredible. And so for this to sort of gradually seep into the human psyche, it's just a way of preparing us. I liken it probably wrongly to the cooking of a frog, but you slowly warm the water, and I think maybe the water is slowly being warmed around us so that we can acclimate to what has to come. And in saying it has to come, it's my belief that this kind of awakening of the human race to a far greater cosmic, and I would have to say spiritual reality, is just about the only thing that is going to unite our world and even save our world.
Well, there are those who say that we definitely need to work on the whole uniting. We have been so divided for so many centuries, maybe millennia for that matter. There are also those who will say that we are headed towards a rerun, only it's number 6 of a mass human extinction, because we refuse, for whatever reason, maybe it's that reptilian brain, we refuse to do the right thing. And I'll use this, it's less of analogy and more reality. I live here in California, which has a lot of regulations about a lot of things. Okay? Matter of fact, probably the most prominent or well-known one, at least in recent times, is one where if you're going to buy anything made from pork, you're going to find it hard to find and very expensive because of the regulations here in California. Well, when I hear these arguments against all these regulations, I say, do you know why regulations were started in the first place? It's because businesses refused to do the right thing when it came to its employees, specifically child labor laws. That's why children are not allowed to work for 10 or 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, maybe 7. They were put there to protect us, you and me, the citizen. Now, I would also acknowledge, too, I don't know about you, Reverend, but I would agree they've gone amok. They've gone a little over the top. They've gone crazy. But they were started for that sole purpose. So, when we start to take a look at this subject matter in terms of how can we as a species survive, and maybe, I'm going to ask you this question, and you're somewhat of a student of history, right? I mean, you have a general knowledge of what a man has done to itself over the centuries, right?
Within reason.
Okay, and I'm not going to get real specific here. We know about the phrase, man's inhumanity to man, right? So, do you think that there is justification for the continuation of the human race? Maybe we deserve to be extinct for the sixth time.
Well, I think there is justification for the human race in at least one way, probably two. But I mean, you see, our understanding in the Aetherius Society is that you say that extinction 6 times. I'm not familiar with that, but certainly our understanding is that we came to this Earth from another planet that we destroyed, namely Malday, over 18 million years ago. All that remains of Malday is the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and there's very good evidence for that in all kinds of different ways. One can sort of look at that, but come to the conclusion that there has to have been a planet. Well, it's our understanding it is a planet that we inhabited and which we destroyed through the tremendous and far greater than our present capability, although we're working on it, I believe, with the Large Hadron Collider, but with the capability to destroy a planet through an atomic war, basically. Now, so that was an extinction of the Maldekians, now known as the terrestrials, the human race. The point being is that in truth and in a divine cosmic sense, nothing can be destroyed in its ultimate complete sense. And to that extent, we are an aspect of the universe in the spiritual sense, because ultimately it all goes back to spirit. And we are an aspect, we are a manifestation in matter of that divine source. And so we couldn't just be taken out of creation. The spiritual aspect of man that is connected to the soul, and the soul to the mind and the emotions and the body, etc. It had to reincarnate, albeit under tremendous limitation. And the only place that we could reincarnate were in this solar system, which by karmic law, I would presume it needed to be within this solar system. But the other all the planetary cultures were already too advanced, too evolved for this extremely involved intelligence with a small I, that known as mankind. And the Earth, as a conscious living intelligence, highly evolved planetary intelligence, offered sanctuary to humanity here to slowly go through this process, inevitable process of reincarnation back to the divine source from which we all came, the Big Bang. You can say it's an interesting journey that we're all on, and it is a fascinating journey, incredible journey. Now, we would again, it's our belief in the Aetherius Society that we evolved into a civilization over millions of years. I mean, we were incredibly involved, came out of the sea as, some little newt kind of creature, I would think, and evolved over millions of years into the civilization of Lemuria, which we again destroyed through the gross misuse of atomic power, and set ourselves back, not as devastating as destroying the planet, but still destroyed the civilization. And then again, through the slow process of reincarnation, evolved up to the civilization known as Atlantis, which we again also destroyed through the gross misuse of atomic power. This was seemingly a few 100,000 years ago. Out of that, the inevitable process goes on, and we have evolved into this present cycle, where again we have the potential to destroy ourselves. I don't think yet we have the potential to destroy the planet, although I think that we're working on that, consciously or unconsciously. And you mentioned earlier on 1947, when this whole thing with UFOs really began. Well, and I'd have to agree with you on that, because it began after, once again, we had developed and tested and used atomic weapons. And here we were again at this very same critical juncture that we've been in Atlantis and Lemuria, and if you go way back even to Maldek. And that's why they started showing up, because they've seen all this from their own planets within our own solar system and within the whole galaxy, literally over millions of years. And I mean, it's more complex than that. And this is at the same time where, the founder of the Aetherius Society, Dr. George King, comes into the picture, because he, unconnected with UFOs, but coming out of the Second World War, in which he served as a conscientious objector, but he realized the need that Nazism was an evil force. He served in London's fire brigade going through the Blitz. So, I mean, he'd seen, frontline action and terrible devastation and mass killing in London of civilians. So out of that, he began to develop himself through extremely intense yogic practice, resulting in his ability to go into the state of cosmic consciousness, or to give his Eastern name, Samadhi. And it was in 1954 that he was first contacted by a being from another world, who goes by the name of Aetherius. So in terms of past history, in that sense, and extinctions, we would argue there have been three. I don't know about the others. I'm certainly not going to dispute that. But here we are, and this is where it brings it, it all together. But more importantly than ourselves, in our understanding in the Aetherius Society, is the planet. And because coming back to why we couldn't be taken out of creation is because nothing can be taken out of creation, because in point of fact, everything is conscious. There is consciousness in everything. And that includes, that it's hard for us to sort of wrap our heads around it, much as I imagine it's probably hard for an ant or a spider to wrap its head around humans being conscious, believe it or not. But this Earth and the whole solar system, all the planets, the sun, the galaxy, all have consciousness. It's just on a completely different level to our own consciousness. We need to start to begin to wrap our heads around that, because it's incredibly elevated. It's incredibly divine. That, I would say, is true spirituality, that realization that all is divine, all is interconnected, all is, if you like, of God, all originated literally from that, what we term rather crudely, the Big Bang, and all is going back to that same singularity from which it arose. And ancient yogis and mystics have always known that. And in fact, they refer to it as the great outbreathing and inbreathing of God. And we are in the process of an inbreathing going back to that one initial creative source from which we came. That is a long-winded answer to your initial question, but opens it up.
We are talking with Reverend Paul Nugent. I'm Richard Dugan, believe it or not, Reverend Richard Dugan, and you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. We bring you new paradigms for a new world on this program. We're looking for those new ways of living. Just look around. The old ways just aren't working. And quite honestly, I think that what we're going to be talking about here on the program, I think it's going to be of benefit. Now, I'm not sitting here as a member of or a proponent of the Aetherius Society. All I'm doing is kind of presenting these ideas and concepts, placing them out on that smorgasbord table I've constantly talked about for you to partake in if you should so choose to. And check it out. Do your own investigation. That's really what it's all about. We're talking with Reverend Paul Nugent, and we're talking about the Aetherius Society. Aetherius.org. We are linked to that website, and we're also going to find out more about George King and his connection, his part in the founding of the Aetherius Society. I want to ask you, before we get into some of the main topics that we want to talk about, I want to ask you about I refer to them as the ancient wisdom teachings. You can refer to the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Quran. I don't know what ancient wisdom teachings there are in Buddhism or many of the other lesser known. Obviously, within Judaism, it's the Torah, the Old Testament, and so forth. Is there a book, a single text for the Aetherius Society in reference to its beliefs that someone can maybe get their hands on and say, hey, well, this is very interesting, or again, no, it's too far out for me. I'm not really interested, and I give someone who is of that last perspective credit for at least looking at it. Okay. But what about that? Is there a particular manuscript that the Aetherius Society uses?
I'm going to answer far more yes than no to that question. And I would refer people to two books specifically rather than just one. Mm-hmm. And I would say that for the more philosophically minded, I would go with this particular book. And for the more spiritually minded, I would go for that particular book. But they are extremely complementary. They were both channeled through Dr. George King. Well, let me name them. The philosophical book is known as The Nine Freedoms, and it gives it's a metaphysical treatise on our evolutionary journey through this solar system, and I'll outline the steps all those 9 steps. It begins with bravery, the bravery to honor one's own inner truth, the bravery to recognize and stand by an honor truth. Not always easy at all. If we did, we'd have a radically different world. What's behind that choice, though, is love. Those two combined lead to service. That path will lead one to enlightenment. Beyond enlightenment, we gain cosmic consciousness. When we can bring about cosmic consciousness at will, we've attained ascension, the ability to ascend, as demonstrated by the great yogic avatar we know as the Master Jesus. Beyond that, it is not the end. In fact, it's not even the beginning of the end. But beyond that, beyond ascension, where do we go? Interplanetary existence, albeit on higher frequencies on other planets within the solar system. 8th freedom is Saturnian existence, the most evolved culture, civilization in this solar system. It's incredible to read about this stuff. I thoroughly recommend it. And then the 9th stopping place, if you like, is solar existence. That there is conscious, intelligent life of an incredibly high frequency. It almost seems sort of crazy to be even, talking about it in these terms. But upon the sun, it's the most holy being in the whole of the solar system. Those are those 9 steps, the 9 freedoms. It's an incredible cosmic spiritual teaching. There's more in it. It goes into Atlantis and Lemuria, as I mentioned earlier, mm-hmm. and Maldic. The other book, which I would very much refer to, and actually is the book that drew me into the Aetherius Society, the sort of more spiritual book, we refer to it, what is known as the 12 blessings. We believe these were given by the Master Jesus, certainly on 12 consecutive Sundays in 1958. We do not believe Jesus is dead in this, coming back to the sense that nothing is dead. There is no death. Mm-hmm. And Jesus, we believe, like the Master Aetherius, actually like the Buddha, came from Venus. I am from the bright and morning star. We believe Jesus was a Venusian who communicated through Dr. George King, giving just this incredible spiritual concept of the whole cosmos. And with it, there are prayers at the end of 9 of the blessings. There are prayers. We use these prayers to send out energy and light and healing, etc., to the world. So those are the 2 books, the 9 Freedoms and the 12 Blessings.
And folks, that's how I was introduced. I just happened to receive an email talking about the 12 blessings, and I went to read them, and I was rather intrigued. And then, of course, some other information on the website, the Aetherius, Aetherius.org. It's really fascinating. Even if you're just nominally interested in these subjects, I think that it would behoove you to at least check it out. We're talking with Reverend Paul Nugent. I'm Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story. And we are talking about the Aetherius Society, Aetherius.org. We are linked to that website, and we encourage you to join us every Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. for the special edition of Tell Me Your Story. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM. We're also on iHeartRadio as well as Amazon Music and other locations, and you can also watch these interviews on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Richard Dugan and Tell Me Your Story. Easy to find. I did find another Tell Me Your Story channel, but I'm the one with the black hat, okay? Doesn't always look that way in the videos, but nonetheless, this is the hat, and just look for me. And we hope that you will do that. And also, if you can, support us financially. We'd greatly appreciate that. We have a PayPal account. It is for your security as well as ours. And when you go to PayPal and you want to send us a contribution, we'd greatly appreciate. It's going to ask you for an email address to send it to, and it's going to be richard@richarddugan.com. Very simple, richard@richarddugan.com. And I thank you to those who have helped and those who will help. We also ask you to participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision. We might even get into this with our guest, Reverend Paul Nugent, in terms of our intuition, listening to that still small voice, going into that quiet place. The Bible refers to it as going into your closet, if you will. Same difference. It's the same thing. And just calm down, relax. It's almost along the lines of when you hear the phrase, go to your happy place. That can be your happy place, okay? So we hope that you'll participate in that, especially as you listen to this program, Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Paul Nugent, Reverend Paul Nugent of the Aetherius Society, Aetherius.org is my guest, and we're talking about this very fascinating, I find it fascinating, Paul, because it is introducing a realm that I actually stayed away from for a long time. I did not want to go down this road back 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. But in the last couple of 3 years, it's like I got to go down this road because I can't escape it. It's part of our universe, whether you talk materially or spiritually. So one of the questions I want to ask you in regards to the Aetherius Society, and then I want to jump into some of these other questions that I've got here. You mentioned George King, and that these respective books that you referred to earlier, the 9 Freedoms, the 12 Blessings, came through him. He was the conduit, if you will, or the channel, right? Is he, in your belief and in the Aetherius Society's belief, is he elevated beyond founder to a position maybe up there as a messenger of God, quote, a prophet, etc., etc.?
Well, let me answer that as best I can. I think that with things like words prophet, I think that you know, time is the judge of those things. It's not, you know, we can obviously wave flags and stick a label on him. Oh, he was a great prophet, etc. Well, we would say that. I think that it needs time to say that. And in saying that, I fully believe that time will say that. In terms of, yes, channeled. Now, I don't know about your listeners. Ordinarily, you know, the word channeling, the concept of channeling, can send a little bit of a shiver down my spine in not the best of ways. You know, sort of, ooh, a bit. This could be a bit dodgy. Mm-hmm. And the difference, I would say, with Dr. George King is, I mentioned earlier that he developed himself by practicing extremely intense yogic practices for up to 8 hours a day over a 10-year period. This resulted in the Kundalini, a force we all have at the base of the spine, rising through the Sushumna channel in the spine, opening all of the chakras and ultimately the Christ center and even the crown center. He had the ability to go into this positive yogic samadhic trance. And this was the state he adopted to receive these messages, mm-hmm. which weren't just mental messages coming to him with so-called automatic writing. They spoke through him and they were recorded. There are over 600 of these cosmic transmissions. I mentioned I came in through the 12 blessings, not so much by reading the 12 blessings, but by hearing the 12 blessings. Every Sunday in our divine services, we're in Hollywood, if anybody's in the area would like to come, at 11 o'clock, but you will hear one of these 12 blessings. It's incredibly pure. There is nothing eerie or spooky or questionable about it. It's, as I say, it has a purity. It has a sort of resonance of absolute pure truth about it. And as such, it was something that I personally felt I couldn't ignore and looked into it more. And I was a practicing Christian at the time, but it had, as I say, this great resonance and purity about it that I couldn't ignore. So Dr. George King, yes, he was the medium, but as I say, in a very elevated state. They were all recorded. They're actually, anybody can, you know, they're available at a very reasonable cost for people to hear. We want that they weren't just given to a few people to be sort of stuck under the bed. They were given for people to hear because it's incredibly enlightening material. I believe it's the kind of material, not necessarily, well, it is unique, but it's not standing completely on its own. There are many complementary teachings, as you mentioned, from other religions that give humanity this incredible vision of what we really are a part of, and this evolutionary spiritual journey that we are on. And it's just incredible. It becomes a divine, blissful, spiritual journey that we are on. But we've lost it. We've lost the thread, and as a result, we've created the chaos and the anger and the foulness and the pollution and everything else as a consequence of having lost our way. We've lost our way, not just in the world, but in creation. We've lost our way. In fact, I mean, I love the quote that I remember reading many years ago, 1984, by Alexander Solzhenitsyn in an article that was published in the London Times newspaper. And he said, the trouble with the West, and this was the old Soviet Union, so he was playing his cards right. But I mean, he really should have said the trouble with the world is that we have lost our consciousness of God. Mm. And I think that sums it up. We have lost our consciousness of God, what God is.
Yeah. Let me ask you one final question in reference to George King specifically. Which is more important or more valuable, let's put it that way, which has more value? And maybe I may be using the wrong words here. George King and following him, or the 9 freedoms and the 12 blessings, and or the other 600 odd messages that were sent through him?
which has more value.
I.e., the message that he brought. Is he more important, or are the messages he brought more important?
Well, it's a bit like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I don't think you can quite separate the two.
Okay. That's fair. That is absolutely fair. Let's talk about one of the practices. You mentioned that he practiced yoga for 8 hours a day every day for 10 years. Let's talk about this King Yoga. Now, before you do, I want to say you mentioned a very interesting term, a word, Kundalini. And in another interview, as I was talking with this person who also works in that energy, and we were chatting away, and I said, well, I've never done the practice. I've been connected with Self-Realization Fellowship, for example, Paramahansa Yogananda, and they talk about that in terms of the practice of raising the Kundalini energy up the spine and so forth. And she said, you don't have to do the practice to have the energy flowing. And I thought, because she says, you already have it flowing, Richard. And I'm going, really? I'm okay. I won't argue with you because, yeah. But let's talk about this aspect of the King Yoga, which I would, again, say, correct me if I'm wrong, helps to get that energy flowing up and down the spine in particular.
Right. Well, first of all, just going back to Kundalini, the rising of the full rising of the Kundalini will result in the mystic state we term cosmic consciousness. As I say in the East, it's known as the state of samadhi, and it's the goal of all. Yoga is a Sanskrit word, another Sanskrit word, which actually means union, and essentially union with God. Speaking of books. One very important book to me in my journey. It's one of the few books that I no longer am willing to lend out. I don't need to lend it out because anybody can buy it. And that's the book entitled Cosmic Consciousness by an American in the 1800s called Richard Morris Buck. And he describes all the people, I think there's about 30 people throughout history, going back to the Buddha, Moses, obviously Jesus, various others, right up to his own sort of guru, so to speak, who was Walt Whitman. He introduced me to Walt Whitman. What a joy that was. But so I think, yes, in a sense, we all have Kundalini running through us, but not only a tiny fraction of its potential. Mm-hmm. Coming back then to George King and what we now call King Yoga, in deference to Dr. George King. He did not come up with this title. We've given it to him in the Aetherius Society, actually just a few years ago, in deference to him, because he did formulate, if you like, this incredible and to that extent, certainly unique spiritual path. And it combines the three aspects that make up the Aetherius Society. Number one are the cosmic teachings, the so-called spiritual wisdom that was given through him by beings from other worlds, with him in this positive yogic somatic trance, over 600 transmissions. Together, I mean, Dr. George King was a yoga master in his own right. I mean, you won't find many people as qualified to speak on such metaphysical topics as karma, reincarnation, life after death, etc., as Dr. King himself. So these are all spiritual teachings, but with a very strong cosmic element to them. It's one aspect. I mentioned, as we've discussed, he practiced yoga, and there are various different disciplines that one can practice. The main ones that he used and that we practice and teach in the Aetherius Society are pranayama, yogic breathing exercises. There's a wonderful system of 6 yogic exercises that can be done in 15 minutes. The Dr. King brought together very, very practical form of yoga breathing, controlling the breath. Another aspect is mantra yoga. We do a lot of mantra in the Aetherius Society. We use visualization. We use prayer. I mean, prayer, probably not ordinarily considered as a yogic practice. I would say it's one of the best yogic practices for enlightening, opening the mind, and all the psychic centers, in point of fact, to divine source, to spirit. But using it in a very practical way. So there's the second aspect then of personal self-development, not just for one's own sake. In fact, we would say more purposefully for the world as a whole. So the third and essentially the main aspect of this path of King Yoga, besides the cosmic teachings, besides the yogic practices, is service, is giving service, because we've got to be serious about our beliefs in the Aetherius Society. We're not half-hearted about it. We do recognize that this planet, this Earth, is changing as part of some far greater cosmic plan. The vibration on this planet is being shifted, and there's an urgency for all mankind to wake up, if you like, to become conscious of this great change that is taking place. So a new world, if you like, is being birthed onto a higher frequency, and humanity, if we're to remain here, needs to make that change. And so that is why service is so important in our beliefs and our practice, to literally radiate spiritual energy, to uplift mankind, to help transmute the negative karmic aspects. And Dr. King, in this sense, devised incredible what we call cosmic missions, because they are missions that involve terrestrials, but also extraterrestrials, these beings from other worlds who've watched over us since Maldek, through Lemuria, through Atlantis, right up to this present age. And that is the major way in which we are able to be of service to the whole world. So those three elements combined make up, as I say, this path that we now call King Yoga, in deference to him. And he would not have given this name himself, because, believe it or not, like all great true yoga masters, he was very humble. He had humility. He wouldn't have put his name to such a thing. But I think we all feel it was right. I say we all, most of us feel that it was right to have honored him in this way.
We're talking with Reverend Paul Nugent of the Aetherius Society. I'm Richard Dugan. The Aetherius Society's website is aetherius.org. We will be linked to that website. And we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. We're bringing you new paradigms for a new world, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And we hope that you will join us at our respective times, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. and 9 a.m. on Wednesdays. Streaming live at those times, you'll be able to hear us online at richarddugan.com. I want to ask you about, you mentioned prayer as one of the aspects that's not commonly thought of in the yoga practice. But what is Operation Prayer Power?
Great question, Richard. And Operation Prayer Power is literally one of these cosmic missions that Dr. King devised for humans to work in cooperation with the gods from space, by which we mean these great, cosmic masters on other planets within our solar system. Dr. George King fully understood the power of prayer. It's an energy. It's the invocation of energy, conditioning it with thought and heart and intention. And you bring all of that together. And when you put intensity behind it, you've got a very real force. In fact, the great Mahatma Gandhi said, prayer, properly understood and applied, is the most potent instrument of action. And who am I to disagree with Mahatma Gandhi? So we use prayer, but and ordinarily, and this was, but it's associated, particularly, you might say, with Christianity. and in the Christian church, we get down on our knees and we put our hands together and we pray either by thought or maybe we say something out loud. That's not how we pray in the Aetherius Society. I'm not ridiculing or criticizing that for a moment to say I came out of the Christian church. It has its place. But in Operation Prayer Power, we're using it as a dynamic force. We are literally invoking it with this energy, with full intention. We use, as I mentioned, the prayers from the 12 blessings. But we don't just send it out through we have chakras in the palms of our hands, which send out energy. That's why, when you're giving healing, you're channeling this energy into the patient. It flows naturally out of the palms of one's hands. And keeping the heart center also through which energy is flowing. And it's flowing very vibrantly if one's really dynamic and bringing the whole prayer together. So you've got this energy, much like electricity. And what Dr. George King, in his understanding of prayer, he also realized that this can be stored. Yes, it can be sent out immediately. It can be sent through healing to an individual, it can be radiated out to a world, to a country, to an individual, to a situation. Yes, and we all should do this, and we certainly do this in the Aetherius Society. But in Operation Prayer Power, we store it. We store it in what we call a battery for storing energy that is filled with very finely ground crystal. Because the crystal will hold whatever energy is put into it. You're talking about very subtle psychic energies. And so each week, and we've been doing this since 1973 in different locations around the world, we invoke this energy. We also have a team of people. We've got one person at the battery using dynamic prayer and mudra to channel the energy, invoke it and channel it. You've also got a team of people all around doing mantra, reciting mantra at the same time. So they're invoking energy and they're directing it to the person praying at the battery who's using a mudra, an antenna system to pick up that very subtle frequency and direct it together with their own prayer energy into this crystalline battery. So we collect it. And then at different situations at different times, if there is a disaster, and we have too many of them, we've already pre-collected 500, 1,000 hours of prayer energy. And we offer it, again with intention, specified intention, to beings around our world who are helping us in this whole evolutionary process at this time, who will manipulate it on our behalf to where it has been intended to go. And we've been doing this, as I say, since 1973. We do it because we know it works. We've seen the results of it working. It cooperates with devic forces, nature elements. It can be picked up by humans. I've spoken with people who work on the front lines after disasters, who were so unbelievably grateful to hear that the Aetherius Society is doing this work, because she'd been in so many disaster zones, and that energy, you can tangibly feel it when you're there, this prayer energy. We believe we've moved hurricanes. We've put out wildfires by letting the winds completely drop to the word miraculous. When you read reports of people in the area, these things are miraculous. They're not miraculous. Miracles are things that we don't understand, but there is a reason why these things happen. It's cooperating in the highest, best, good sense of divinity. And so that is what Operation Prayer Power is. We do it every week here in Los Angeles. It's every Thursday. I can't hear you.
I have a question in regards to this battery that you speak of. why is it, you've explained how it is used, but why not during the disaster? Do you not just pray? Why don't you just send up the energy at that time?
I mean, do that as well. It's
Okay.
just that, well, put it like this. Let's say that there is a fire next door.
Mm-hmm.
And for the last, we have filled, great containers with water. Now, if you haven't got that, if you all you've got is the bottle of water you just swigged from, you're not going to be able to put the fire out. But if it's already pre-collected, it's there, it's at hand, and it becomes extremely concentrated. Yes, whenever there's a disaster, the whole human race should stand up and send energy to that situation. But it's just, in a way, you could say, this Operation Prayer Power is like the cavalry arriving.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. Reverend Paul Nugent is my guest of the Aetherius Society. I'm Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story. We're bringing you new paradigms for a new world, and we're talking with the spokesperson, at least in this conversation, for the Aetherius Society. And you certainly talked about this whole aspect of prayer and all of these different things. I want to ask you, because somehow I feel this probably ties in, what is satellite number 3?
You are an intuitive man, Richard, let it not be said. It does very much tie in. It ties in particularly with Operation Prayer Power. But it actually sort of greatly precedes Operation Prayer Power. You see, coming back, and one has to come back to Malday and Lemuria and Atlantis and the Mother Earth. Because these things are cosmic. These things, I don't know if you ever read, I use the story very, very briefly, but in the hope that it will illustrate the point. I'm assuming you've read Hamlet, Shakespeare's play Hamlet.
Yes, I'm familiar, yes.
Good man. Well, there are two lesser characters in Shakespeare's play Hamlet, known as Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They're courtiers, they're friends of Hamlet. They play small roles in the play. Well, back in, I don't know, the 60s, 1960s, maybe 1970s, a wonderful playwright called Tom Stoppard wrote a play called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, because actually in Hamlet they do die. And this play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, is about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's world, coming back to your universe, my universe. This was Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's individual universe. And it's what goes on in their world. But in that cycle, it occasionally interacts with Hamlet, with Shakespeare's Hamlet. And the parts that Shakespeare gave to them in Hamlet appear in Tom Stoppard's play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. If you can see like a wheel or cogs are turning, and occasionally it will intersect with this bigger play of Hamlet that was going on, if you can follow me. And it's the same for all our individual universes. Yes, we're all sort of revolving in our world, in our little universes, but they intersect with other universes, with other people and bigger things. And our world, and indeed our whole solar system, intersects with something far bigger. The whole solar system is interacting itself with other moving parts in this whole galactic system. And in that sense, when people ask me what's going on, I always like to say Laniakea, Laniakea is a supercluster of galaxies. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, together with hundreds of thousands of galaxies in this corner of the universe, are accelerating at incredible velocities towards this supercluster of galaxies known as Laniakea. It's an Hawaiian word, which means immeasurable heaven. That's what's really going on. And so coming back to satellite number 3, these cosmic masters have watched over us, as I say, for millennia. And they know that the whole evolutionary process in this solar system is quickening. It's not just on this Earth, it's quickening within the whole solar system. You could say because it's dovetailing into Laniakea. There's something far greater. We're all going back to that singularity, aka God, from which it all came. That's what's really going on. And knowing that humanity was behind the curve, we screwed up. We've repeatedly screwed up. We've lost our consciousness of God. We've forgotten what we're really a part of, this big picture. And they, because love is the energy of the universe, compassion is the energy of the universe, service is the modus operandi of creation, sacrifice in point of fact, not just service, sacrifice, because one knows that it's all oneness. It's all divine. It's like a parent's love for a child, however much that child screws up, but the love remains. And so satellite number 3 is an extraterrestrial craft that has been coming into orbit, to the best of our knowledge, since 1955, radiating a frequency of energy to anybody on the planet who is involved in some kind of selfless, conscious, spiritual action. And here, the mechanics of it, but everything is energy. And so whatever it is at that molecular level, whether it's a frequency from the heart, the mind, whatever it is able to be enhanced by this craft satellite number 3 by a factor of 3,000 times. I would say satellite number 3 has been the biggest game changer on Earth in the last 65 odd years. And we've seen a radical shift in just about everything. You know, they refer to this period that we're living through as the exponential age, because literally everything is going exponential. And I would say perhaps the biggest single catalyst in that has been satellite number 3. Consciousnesses are being changed. We are shifting. You might not see it playing out exactly on the political level, but at a grassroots level, there are more and more people getting with this far bigger program, this far greater reality. There's an urgency. There's an understanding that is being birthed. And satellite number 3, I would say, has been an incredible force behind that. And to bring it to prayer power, when it is in orbit, when satellite number 3 is in orbit of Earth, it comes in at specific periods each year. It's currently in orbit, in point of fact. We cooperate with it. And one of the ways we cooperate with it, besides our prayer service and everything else, is we offer this prayer power energy that we've invoked through radionic apparatus that Dr. King devised. We call it a spiritual energy radiator. We put the battery on at one end, we have an antenna on at the other end, and that energy is picked up by satellite number 3 that will use it as it is and where it is most or best needed on Earth at this time.
We're talking with Reverend Paul Nugent, and you're kind of describing the way in which the healing energies, as I was taught going through my master's class in Reiki, that you send the energy out, but you don't send it out with a specific intention for quote-unquote healing of a particular individual. You send it out with the intention of giving it to that person or situation and letting that person or situation use it in whatever way they choose. And I'll keep the story very brief. My father's brother, my uncle, was diagnosed with cancer. we wanted to send him an absentee healing, so we did. About a month or two later, we went to his funeral. And then my mother told me about what happened shortly after we sent him this absentee healing. And he got angry. He had enough energy. He threw his medications across the room, jumped in his wheelchair, wheeled across the compound where his family lived to where his son and his family lived in their house. Had a time of father-son closure, if you will. And then shortly after that, he passed. That's what he chose to do with that energy. Mm-hmm. Someone else might have chosen to use it to eradicate the cancer cells. But it's not up to us. So, to that end, whether it be satellite number 3, whether it be prayer power, the Operation Prayer Power, and so forth, what is our... I'm about to ask that ultimate question. What is our purpose in all of this? Because you've already stated that we came from the singularity. We came from the one. We're going back to the one. And in one sense, in one real sense, we've never really left the one.
No, true.
We've never really left it.
No.
But we find ourselves here in what we like to call this dualistic world. The Hindus call it Maya or illusion. Okay? And none of this is real. And yet all of this is real, at least in the context of energy. So share with us our purpose in this process, our purpose for being, our purpose in the universe.
Well, I think that's an unanswerable, in terms of, well, I think some of that is an unanswerable question, and that, as somebody said very, very wisely, is that's what makes God God, because it is completely understandable. But in terms of, if there was a why in that question, I always go back to my college days back in England, back in the 70s. And I saw the film, if you remember it, because we were of a similar age, The Deer Hunter. You're looking a bit like a deer hunter there in your hat. and as a college kid, I saw this film, The Deer Hunter, and I just thought, wow, that's just such an amazing film. And I went to my, what we call here, roommate back there in England, called flatmate. And I went to him and I said, I envy you. And he looked at me and said, well, why? And I said, because you do not know what a treat you are in for when you go to see this film, The Deer Hunter. And I think that's, I use that kind of as a metaphor, because I think we're on this journey and we just don't know what we're in for. It just becomes more and more and more incredible. Well, and the 12 blessings, the 12 blessings outlines that. We are on this cosmic journey. We use the word bliss. Bliss is a starting point. This mystery, unraveling this unravelable mystery, is just such an ecstatic dance in the greatest possible inconceivable cosmic sense. I mentioned Laniakea. We can't begin to think of something like Laniakea, and yet we're a part of Laniakea. And Laniakea would be incomplete without us as individuals. We are all essential to this cosmic whole. We are on the most incredible journey through enlightenment, through cosmic consciousness, through ascension, through interplanetary experience, through Saturnian experience, through solar existence, to galactic experience, intergalactic experience, supergalactic experience. That's the journey we're on, in this ecstatic journey of going back to the source, for this to know that.
I myself have come to a realization, and it was sort of brought to me indirectly through someone who challenged me when they said, well, what about all your mistakes, Richard? Where this answer came from, I can only speculate. I haven't made any mistakes in my life. I have only had learning experiences. And when you take pass, fail, success, failure out of the equation and replace it with learning experiences, maybe just experiences in general, there is no need for forgiveness of self or others. Because if you see yourself as not having made mistakes, but just having learning experiences, then so everybody else is in the same position. They are all just having learning experiences. Now, you would probably agree with me, and because you kind of alluded to this earlier in the program, as referencing consciousness and the raising of the consciousness, there are going to be those people who will resist that rising of the consciousness. They will resist it with every fiber in their being because they don't want things to change. They want to hold on to the power and the control and the money and the material aspects.
Very true, and I think that's playing out. We can see our world is getting more desperate in that sense.
Yeah.
But it cannot last, and it will break.
It's not sustainable. Yeah.
No, not at all.
Right. Reverend Paul Nugent, my guest. The Aetherius Society, aetherius.org is the website, which we are linked to here on Tell Me Your Story. We're talking about the Aetherius Society, and Reverend Paul Nugent, I want to thank you so much for giving us, again, so much time on the program, talking about so many of these aspects, so many more questions that come to mind. We started going in a direction that would actually, if we went on for another hour, I'd be going into free will versus predestination and reincarnation and all of these other aspects that I think are very important to talk about. And hey, part 3, we're going to have part 3, Paul. If you're open to it, we'll do it.
All right.
I would love to do it. And thank you so much for giving us so much time.
My pleasure, Richard.
I have 3 final questions. I asked you at the end of the last program. I'm going to ask you again.
Well, I can't remember my answers, so let's see if I come up with something the same or something different.
You got it. I will ask you those in just a moment. But first, I want to thank you for tuning in, listening, and watching Tell Me Your Story. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com with podcasts at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. We are also on YouTube where you can watch these interviews. I hope you'll subscribe to the podcasts and videocasts as well. And we also hope that you can support us financially with contributions through PayPal for your security as well as ours, and participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, another subject that we need to get into in terms of our intuition as well with our guest, Reverend Paul Nugent. And we will do that in our part 3 in this ongoing series with the Aetherius Society. Let me start by asking you question number 1. Who is Paul Nugent?
That's right. Well, I'm going to be a bit cryptic, but I'm going to say Paul Nugent is a reflection of yourself.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
Divine realization.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
To achieve that.
And once again, I thank you for giving us so much time, and I thank you for listening and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal.